And we are off. Okay, in presentation mode. So just as a reminder, if you're not speaking, please put your microphones on mute. There's a little microphone icon in the Skype web app link, and you can just click on that, and a little bar will come across it. That'll help to reduce the background noise. So I appreciate that. So welcome to the annual Pacific Crest Trail Water Report for the class of 2019. I've been doing these annual webinars now. This is the fourth year in a row, I believe. We used to do these in person at the PCT kickoff down in Campo, but as most of you know, that they stopped doing the kickoff meeting. I think it was 3 years ago now. So we kind of reverted back to this webinar format, but it seems to work well. I am recording this and we'll be uploading it to the PCT Water YouTube channel, which is really easy to find. I'll navigate there and show you here in a second, but all you gotta do is go to YouTube and type in PCT Water. It'll pull up all of the water report webinars and the Sierra webinar, which I believe there'll be some questions on tonight. So we'll just jump right into this. And like I said once before, it's a very open forum, so feel free to chime in or submit a question in the chat box at any time. So jumping right into it, just a few things about the water report. This is a crowd sharing free resource for all you hikers out on the trail. It's available at www.pctwater.com, and I'll navigate to it here in a second and show you how to use it. It's pretty straightforward. But one key thing to note is that we screen every update that we get for quality control, for lack of better words. I thru hiked the PCT in 2014 and spent a lot of time up in the Sierra in the summer and fall months. So pretty familiar with that part of the trail, and have done the whole trail at least once. So kind of know the ins and outs, but it really rely on what you guys are sending in. I got an update the other day from someone, or a question saying, "Hey, how come you haven't updated the water report recently? There's a lot of water sources that haven't been updated in a while in the desert section." And well, it's because no one has sent me in updates. So it really depends on how much you guys are sending in to us. So, it's a way to pay it forward for the hikers behind you. So, we ask anytime you get in cell coverage, or you're at a hotel taking a zero and you get some Wi-Fi, to, maybe send in your updates to us. And it's real straightforward. Basically down here, you can email at water@pctwater.com, or you can text to this number here, or call this number and leave a voice message. And I'm now on the mode of checking the updates every day and updating at least once a day. And I will do this every day between March and November, unless I'm on a backpacking trip, which does happen in the summer and fall months. And when I'm doing that, then Half Mile will back me up if he's not also hiking. But more often than not, one of us will be updating this. Now, we're not the only source, obviously, and we're not saying you should only use our source. I've used multiple sources in the past. Gut Hooks is a very great app. I used both Gut Hooks and the water report when someone else was updating it when I hiked in 2014. So definitely use both. A HikerBot, I've gotten a lot of good feedback on that, which I believe that's a free app. So always, I always tell people, try to get as much information as possible so you can make an educated decision and a safe decision. It's all about your safety. So a couple of new things, though, is we did add a page for the Sierra snow and pass conditions, and also for water crossings, and I'll show you where that is on the report. We did that in 2017 when we had a heavy snow year, and as most of you are already aware, we're having a pretty heavy snow year so far this year, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on. One other thing that started to happen last year, which I really like, is that people were adding our email to their inReach devices. If you happen to have a DeLorme Garmin inReach, that's what I happen to use. And those are really nice because you can send those to us and that'll be real-time updates. Whereas if you're in the Sierra and you just have your cell phone, it might be a day, sometimes 2 or 3 or 4, even 5 days before you get cell phone coverage. So your update might be a little out of date. But another way to update it is I created this Facebook page a couple of years ago, and here you can upload photos and videos. This is the best avenue to submit videos because I don't think you can really email or text them to us because it's just too big. And I'll show you that page here in a second and what I do with those photos. I try to categorize them by section so that you can go and see them. And this has become quite helpful for hikers, especially when I get videos of some of the more dangerous water crossings or the Sierra High Route passes. So, what a couple things we ask when you send us in updates, just to make it easy for us to kind of decipher it, is always include the mileage points and or the halfway waypoint. I'm sorry, half mile waypoints. This is very helpful for us because obviously we don't know what you're talking about. You got to tell us where it is, and also tell us the dates. Often I'll get an email or a text that has all these great updates for like 20 sources in a row, but sometimes the date's not there. And so I have to assume that, the day that you send that in to me is the day that you were there. But I'd rather not assume that. I'd rather know exactly what date you're at the source so that we're giving the hikers on the trail the most current and up-to-date information. One note that kind of caused some confusion last year was that there was a change in California Section M, which is in the North Sierra. When you start going northbound out of Sierra City, the PCTA rerouted the PCT there and it added a couple of miles onto the trail. And what happened last year is that there was a mileage point discrepancy between half miles maps and gut hooks. So I asked that when you send in mileage points, please use half miles if you can. Maybe that discrepancy has been solved this year, but if not, if you can reference half mile, that makes my life a lot easier. And I just want to harp on this point one more time here at the very bottom. The report is only as good as inaccurate and current as the updates that are getting sent in to me. So update it as much as you can, and that way you can pay it forward to the hikers behind you. Just make sure there are no questions so far. No, okay. So a couple of new items for 2019. I started to add a little bit of a history for some of the more important water sources, to give you like the last three updates as opposed to just the last one. And this will hopefully give you an idea of, hey, maybe the last update on this water source coming up in a few miles is 3 days old, but I don't know if it's going to be running today. So we try to give you a history to give you a better feeling for, if that water is going to be running once you get there. E. coli has been detected in many areas along the trail, especially in Southern California, especially in California Section A around the Mount Laguna area. Just a couple of weeks ago, I got a report that E. coli was detected at Lake Morena at mile 20 from the Mexico border. And this is your first reliable source of water on the trail. And so the point I'm trying to get across here is, especially in the desert sections in Southern California, be sure you treat your water at every single water source. One really great update is that the mountain fire closure has finally been lifted. This is near Idlewild, which is about the second trail town
Great.
to. Yeah, this is great news. This was from a fire from I think it was back in 2013 or so, and it took 5 years
Wow.
for the trail crew to get this back up and running. So that's really nice. Now there are some issues with the roads around that area right now in terms of washouts because of the heavy rains. So if you plan on hitching around the Idlewild Mount San Jacinto area, it basically, as of right now, means you can only hitch down into Palm Springs from the PCT. So keep that in mind, and we add these things onto the water report to try to make it almost a one-stop shop for this kind of information. I believe most of you guys already know that Half Mile is unfortunately not supporting his PCT app in 2019. However, his 2019 PCT maps are uploaded and updated and ready to download for free at this link here, so you're good to go on that front. But then there are plenty of other apps that can help you out to do what his app used to do. If I could ask everyone to mute their mics, that'd be great. I'm hearing some background noise. Okay. Still hearing some background noise, so if everyone can mute their mics, that'd be great. Okay. Um, I got this update just the other day, actually, on the Mount San Jacinto Trail conditions. There's a nice website there that you can click on because obviously by the time you get there, it's going to change between now and then. So just another resource. There is I know there's going to be a lot of questions in regards to the Sierra this year because of the high snow year we're having so far. So Ned Tibbetts and we did a Sierra webinar for the class of 2017 because that was a real high snow year too. And there's a link here that you can click on it. It's also on the YouTube PCT Water channel. And it's going to be very applicable for this year too. We may or may not do another one for class of 2019. It kind of depends on, if you guys want that or not. But, take a look at the 2017 Sierra webinar for more information. And then last but not least, kind of on an ancillary note, I created a documentary last year to kind of catalog or kind of summarize what's life like after the trail in terms of post-trail life and depression. Kind of a morbid topic or a morose topic to talk about before you start this great experience. But one thing I do recommend is that if you go to this link and check out 1 hour, 24 minutes and 5 seconds, there's a section about having a plan before you come home. And that was a common theme that I ran into when I interviewed. I interviewed probably like 11 through hikers. So maybe just something to watch before you leave, and then you can watch the rest when you come home. So I'm going to go right to the website here. Here's what it looks like, and it's really easy to use. Basically, if you want to look at the PDFs, you can click on any of these links down here. So for example, if I click on part 1, Campo to Idlewild, then it'll pull up a PDF. If you're on your phone, I think it pulls it up automatically. I'll make this a little bigger so you can see it all. And it's just got all the information about the water sources and more, actually. What's key to note here is in the upper right-hand corner, this shows you the last time I updated the file. So today I did it at 3:32 in the afternoon. And between now and the end of November, that's when I'm in daily updating mode, which is important for the southbounders to realize, because a lot of times people think that we stop updating it come into September when most of the northbounders quit. But there's more and more southbounders starting each year, and so we try to do it daily all the way to end of November. But it's very straightforward. Everything is referenced to half miles maps. So if you look at the first line here, if you look at map A1, which is this guy here, when you look at half miles maps, basically that mile 1.2 half mile waypoint WR001 at the Cottonwood Community Day School. I got an update back in November from Freebird saying the faucet is on. I'm kind of surprised I haven't gotten an update, since then, because there's actually a lot of hikers on the trail right now. But as you go down, you'll see here at mile 4.4, I got an update from Bucky on February 27th, and so forth and so forth. And I mentioned earlier that we're putting some history in here. Like you can see Lake Miranda Campground. There's a note about the E. coli, an update from 121. You just keep on going down. We'll add in stuff when we feel like it's necessary. For example, last year at mile 9.1, there was a beehive that was causing some issues. That's right off the trail, which wasn't as bad as there was a beehive coming down Mount San Jacinto that was giving hikers all kinds of troubles last year. So far this year, it hasn't been a problem, and if I see that it's not a problem for many more updates, I'll take it off. But we try to update you when we come across things like this, when we get updates from you guys on the trail. Going down a little further, you'll see like Rodriguez Spur Truck Trail Tank at 68. This is a real important water source, so I'll actually put a little bit more history in there just to kind of give you an idea. And some color on, hey, a couple times last year it went dry. Now last year we didn't get as much water or much rain and snow, so that could have factored into it. But just trying to give you as much information as possible, because basically you're going to be sitting there, at a water source, looking at your map, saying, okay, when's my next water source? It's 5 miles away, and hopefully you got the water report, or you're looking at gut hooks or something. And you have to make an educated guess with the information in your hands on, is that water going to be there when I get there in 5 miles? And that's not always an easy answer. And, these are the tools to help you answer that. But it's also about knowing your body and knowing how much water you need to hike comfortably and safely. Everyone is different. But that's why I really recommend to go out there and do some practice trips, at least 3 or 4 days, ideally in a, desert-like condition if possible. But if not, just to get an idea of how much water your body is consuming, especially with considering elevation gain in mind. Okay, so going back to this. So that's how it works. Now, I wanted to put some instructions here on how to automatically cache the water report onto your cell phone. I hadn't done this in years, so I forgot how to do it. It's already doing it on my phone, but I posted the other day, and Martin London, he posted these directions here. So, I'm not going to go through each step. This will be uploaded to the YouTube channel, and I'm also going to upload these PowerPoint files onto the pctwater.com site so you can download them, and I'll do that after the webinar. But basically, the way this is a really nice tool, and when I've done some hikes on the PCT since my through hike, I just set it up. I set it up this way so that when you come into cell signal, and I think it does it automatically, but I like to open up each of the pages to make sure it's been uploaded and updated automatically. But one other thing to consider here, and I know I'm old school on this, is that cell phones are great, and they're very handy and efficient, and you can put all this information on them, but they do break, and you can run out of power. So I highly recommend that you carry a printout of the water report with you. And many of the very kind trail angels along the way will have water reports printed out for you. So just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind. I knew a guy when I hiked in 2014 who accidentally got into the Deep Creek Springs with his cell phone in his pocket and didn't realize it till it was too late. So his cell phone was done. And so he didn't have paper maps. He didn't have anything. So we had to rely on other people to help get him through. But follow these instructions, and if anyone has any problems with them, just contact me and let me know so I can fine tune it. But I would highly recommend you do this. Now I only have it for iOS or the iPhone. I don't know if it works for the Android. So if anyone has step-by-step instructions for Android, I'd really appreciate it so I can add it to this file. Let's see if there's any questions. Nope. Okay, you guys are quiet. Okay, a note on water caches. You're probably tired of hearing people say this, but we're just going to beat this point home. You should never rely on them. Kind of just when you're strategizing your next move here on how much water should I have, and say there's reliable water 10 miles from where you're at, and there's a cache at 5, I would just assume that cache is dry. Now, that there are some special exceptions, like the third gate cache at mile 91.2, but this one is in a league within itself. But one important thing to note is that this cache actually went dry for the first time, as far as I've known, in 2017 and 2018. And I'm going to show you some data here to back that up. And that's mainly because every year there are more and more hikers trying to through hike the PCT. And it's really straining the trail rangers who maintain these caches. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And when you come across a cache and there's water there, it's a nice surprise, and you only take what you need, but don't rely on them and don't plan on them being there when you get there. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time later on in this webinar talking about California Section F, which is the most challenging section in terms of a water strategy, because it's got some very long dry stretches in them. So speaking of the third gate cache, the very kind trail angels who maintain this send me these numbers every year. And this is the gallons usage going back to 2012 by month. And these are the peak hiking months. So you can see in 2018, by the end of March 31st, the increase between 207 and 333 gallons. And then the increase at the end of April 30th. April's probably the busiest month for the third gate cache, but the numbers here show you a lot. You could see just in 3 years it practically doubled in terms of the consumption. And the fact that this cache has gone dry a few times in the past 2 years, it says a lot. So, and keep this cache clean if you can. It's a very important one for many people. It's right smack dab in the middle of a 24-mile waterless stretch in the San Felipe Hills. So we want to make sure we maintain this so this cache is there in the future. Some photos here to show you what some of these water sources might look like. Sometimes it's a trough, sometimes it's a big circular trough like this. Sometimes it's coming out of a pipe. It really varies. But one thing to note is that you really need to treat the water. And sometimes you don't see where it's coming from. This picture here is actually taken at Barrel Spring, which is at mile 101. And this is not Barrel Spring that you see. This was above it as it's feeding down into a big rectangular concrete tank. And so the water coming out into that tank may look clean, but this is where it's coming from. So just because it looks clean where you're getting it from doesn't mean that it's a clean source. And so I just, highly stress to treat water in the Southern California section. Actually, in most sections, everyone's different. Um, there are some places in the Sierra I don't treat. If I look up and there's no way a human or cows can be around, then yeah, I just drink straight from that nice cold water coming down. But you're really taking a chance, in my humble opinion, in other places if you don't treat it. So some highlights here on some of the more challenging water sections, broken up by sections. Right off the bat, you're hit with a 19 to 20 mile waterless stretch, and it's your first day out there. Depending on when you're leaving, it can be pretty hot. And the idea here is carry plenty of water. And, everyone's different, of course. For myself, I started with, I think it was 5 liters at Campo. And I didn't use all five by the time I got to Lake Marina, but, I sometimes overcompensate because I actually got dehydrated once actually on a day hike in Yosemite, and it's a horrible feeling. It's one of the worst feelings in the world. And you don't want to experience that, especially on your first day. And one other thing to highlight about the first day is it's okay to take 2 days to get to Lake Morena. I see this every year where people they go for broke on the first day and they think, okay, I can do 20 miles and I want to get to where there's reliable water. Well, that's great if you're in great shape and you've been out there backpacking and, like very, very recent to your start of your hike. But I've actually seen people's through hikes end on the first day because they just exert themselves too much. So it's okay to dry camp, and dry camping is not ideal, but there are some advantages to it. You don't have to push yourself as far, and it's going to be quiet too. You can get the place all to yourself most of the time. One other thing that's really nice to note here is that you don't have to start off with a lot of food. You can do your first resupply at Mount Laguna, which can take anywhere between 2 to 3 days to get there, depending on how fast you hike. So you don't have to start off with 4 or 5 days on your back, and that's a nice way to start. Just kind of start off light, and you can build your strength up. The next big section is coming down from Mount San Jacinto, and for northbounders, at least you're going down. For northbounders, this is a pretty hellacious 8,000-foot climb, but that's about 20 miles until you hit the Snow Canyon Faucet, which is a real reliable water source at 186. You can get a lot of snow on San Jacinto. There's a lot of snow now, and I actually have photos I took from a plane trip where I flew right over LA last week where I can show you how much snow is on it. In Section D, in the Cajon Pass area, this is actually one of the most challenging water sections, in my opinion, because you got a really long waterless 6,000-foot climb. It's 23 miles from I-15, and this is where the infamous McDonald's is, where you'll spend $20 to $30 in one sitting. And 6,000 feet with 23 miles is a lot to go with no water. And this is getting even more difficult because Guffey Spring is going dry more. It went dry in 2016, 2017, and 2018 multiple times. And last year I wasn't surprised, or in 2016, because those were low winter or low snow years. But 2017 wasn't, and it still went dry. So the key thing here is that you can't rely on Guffey Spring to be operating. So that's going to be something you're just going to have to figure out how much you want to start with to go up a 6,000-foot climb. And obviously, it kind of works against you. The more water you have, the more weight you have on your back. So it can be very challenging. Of course, the Aqueduct Walk in Section E, an infamous section. It can get very hot. Some people hike that at night. California Section F. There's a couple of 30 plus mile waterless stretches, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But a lot of people think that once you get into the Sierra, you're done with long waterless stretches, and unfortunately, that's not the case. You got a 30-mile waterless stretch in Northern California at mile 1377 on the Hat Creek Rim. And by the time you're in this area, for most northbounders, it's July, which is a very hot month in California, and you're at much lower elevations. And this section is extremely exposed. There's hardly any shade, so it can get really hot. Now, one nice thing to note, and this has been added to Half Mile's maps, is that there is a spring at mile 1386, Lost Creek Spring. It's off trail. I think it's like a mile or something like that. And it can be a little steep from the reports I've gotten. I've never been down there myself, but it seems to be a very reliable spring. So if you get into trouble, that's something to consider when you're hiking that area. A lot of people hike this at night. I ended up hiking most of it at night in 2014, and which can be kind of a nice break from things. And then in Oregon, in southern Oregon, there's a 26-mile waterless stretch before you hit Crater Lake, which a lot of people don't realize. But at least the terrain there is a little more gentle and not as much up and down. Okay, let's see. Are there any questions so far? Nope. All right.
Hey, Matt, I actually have a quick question.
Sure. Go for it.
So I'm a semi-experienced hiker, but I've never had the opportunity to do a real desert hike before. You mentioned that you had about 5 liters of water at the beginning of the hike. What was your total water capacity, and what would you recommend that someone bring, especially for someone like me who tends to sweat a lot? I'm just kind of curious because I've read reports and that sort of stuff from other people who have done the PCT, and they're all over the place from like 7 liters to 10 liters. And I just, I can't really place a number very easily.
Great question. Yeah, it's really personal. For me, I have capacity for 7 liters, and that includes a 3 liter Camelback, and then I have two Gatorade bottles that I put on the side. Those are about a liter also. Oh, actually, that's when I do my summer hikes. When I hiked the PCT, I had four Gatorade bottles, so that was almost 4 liters plus 3 liters for the Camelback. Um, so yeah, I think I only maxed that out once, and that was in section F, which I'll talk about in a second. But for me, I started with 5 liters at Campo, and like I said earlier, I didn't use it all, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with coming to the next water source and having a little bit of water left over. I think you get yourself into trouble when you're completely bone dry when you get to a water source. And it's all about knowing how much water your body's going to take. So I think you said you're an experienced hiker, so that's good. So you've done a lot of trips and hopefully with some elevation, so you can get an idea of what your body needs to feel comfortable while you're hiking.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure. Just some notes. I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about Section A, which is your very first section if you're a northbounder, and then Section F, which is the challenging water section. Oh yeah, here it is. So start at least with 6 liters of water. I think I started with 5. Your first guaranteed water is at Lake Morena at mile 20, but don't go for broke. You don't have to reach it all in one day. There is Hauser Creek at mile 15, but Hauser Creek is really unreliable. It's probably running right now because of all the rain we're getting. But by the time, the herd, or as we call it, when the big chunk of PCT hikers are moving up the trail is there, 95% of the time Hauser Creek is not running. Now there are some off-trail water sources in that area, and we've highlighted that on the report. So if you get into trouble, you can go find that. But every year we hear of hikers having to get rescued between the border and Lake Morena. And actually one year, I think it was in 2014 when I hiked, a hiker actually passed away. And I'm not saying this to be alarmist, and I'm not trying to scare everyone, but it can happen. And so you just have to make smart, educated decisions, and always remind yourself that the safety is the most important thing, right? Sometimes we get tunnel vision, and I've I had this too when I hiked. All you could think of was Canada, 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 and you had to sacrifice so much just to take that first step on the trail. You got to put those feelings aside and think, how much water do I need to make sure I can get to the next reliable water source? Easier said than done at times, but always just kind of keep that mindset, and you'll be fine. So a couple things here. Mile 68, Rodriguez Spur Fire Tank. I kind of showed you that on the report earlier. This is a very important water source, and it's gone dry many times in the last few years. Now there is a spring 1 mile off the trail from there. And many people are starting to go to that spring now because they get to Rodriguez and it's just not there. It's no water. And then I heard sometimes that spring has gone dry too. So you can't. It was a very reliable water source until 2017, and now it's starting to become more and more unreliable. The Scissors Crossing water cache at mile 77 is being maintained this year, but the gentleman who maintains it is actually through hiking. I think his trail name is Professor, so you might run into him on the trail. He says he has a crew maintaining it, but it's going to be a new set of eyes, a new set of people doing it. So just keep that in the back of your mind because this is a cache before third gate at mile 91. And the whole reason I'm spending so much time on this is all the ones in yellow here are questionable. If I was hiking, I would assume that none of these have water, and that can mean a pretty long waterless stretch. So just you got to think worst case scenario here. Okay. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about Section F. This is from Tehachapi until Walker Pass, starting at, I think it's mile 566. And this is probably the most challenging section for your water strategy, and I'll highlight why here. So basically, from Tehachapi to Robin Bird Spring, or actually, I'm sorry, Golden Oak Spring is the first reliable water source, and even a few years ago that wasn't so reliable. That's at 583. Tehachapi at mile 566, so you can do the math there and see it's quite long, and it also depends on where you leave from Tehachapi. And not a lot of people realize this, and I didn't realize it until I got there, but it's best illustrated by looking at the half mile map. So when you come to the end of California Section E, you hit a road here at mile 558 called Tehachapi Willow Springs Road. This is where a majority of hikers hitch into Tehachapi, and you take a zero, you get a resupply, and you go get an eclair at the bakery, which is one of the best eclairs I've ever had in my life. And that's great and all, but that's not the end of Section E. Section E actually goes on for, oops, gotta rotate this. It goes up until Highway 58 at mile 566. And what a lot of people end up doing is they hitch in from the earlier point, then they come back, and then they hike the rest of Section E and then start Section F, which already has a long stretch of dry trail until you hit Golden Oak Spring. It's not as easy to hitch in from Tehachapi from Highway 58. It's doable, but it's a high speed highway. Cars are going by at 75 miles an hour. So if you're a purist and you want to make sure you're hitting every inch of trail possible, you have to factor in that 8 mile stretch. And then you get to Golden Oak Spring at 583. And that can be this one it got more reliable last year, but I always kind of question it because sometimes it gets damaged by the cattle in the area, which I don't know why cattle would damage it, but somehow they do. But it can be a very slow drip. And with the number of hikers increasing on the trail, I've actually seen lines, at these slow drip water sources. So you could be waiting for a while, to fill up your water if you got 5 or 10 hikers ahead of you. So this note here, if you start at Tehachapi Willow Springs Road, adds 8 miles to that waterless stretch. So it actually makes it, 44 miles if Golden Oak Spring is not running, because Robin Bird Spring is really your first ultra reliable water source. I've never heard of Robin Bird at mile 602 going dry. More than likely, Golden Oak Spring will be running. Check your water report, and I'm very interested in getting updates on any of the Section F water sources here. So please send those in. But you kind of have to assume the worst case scenario and think Robin Bird Spring is your first water source. So that could be a very long 44 miles or 36 miles, depending on where you start after Tehachapi. That's the bad news. The good news is that the next reliable water source is only 7 miles away at Landers Camp. I've never heard of this one going dry. It's just a little bit off trail, and it's actually a pretty nice big open campsite area. The next water source is Willow Spring at mile 620. This one is actually off trail, 1.6 miles, so you have to factor that in. And it did go dry a few times in the last 3 years. So, once again, assume worst case scenario and check the water report every time you get signal, check gut hooks every time you get signal, use all the information out there that you can to make your strategy. Now, what's interesting about Willow Spring is that it's off trail, and I don't know, for me, if it's anywhere more than a mile off trail, I'm probably not going to go there. So if you decide not to go to Willow Spring and you use Landers Camp as your watering up point, this is where I watered up to 7 liters per the gentleman's earlier question, which sucked horribly. But I knew that I could get from mile 609 to down here, mile 651, Highway 178, on 7 liters of water. And this is all where it comes to, personal decisions, because I knew I was going to skip over Willow Spring. I didn't want to take 3.2 miles off, off trail to go there. But you may be okay with doing that. And if that's the case, then at mile 609, you don't need to water up as much if you feel comfortable that Willow Spring has water to it. There's a couple of caches in here, which can make life a lot easier, but it can also complicate things. There's some very kind trail angels who maintain these, but I hate to use the word unreliable because it's not the trail angels who are unreliable. It's unreliable because of the amount of people on the trail. And in 2014, when I came down to Bird Spring Pass, it had just been restocked and there was 100 gallons. And I heard that 24 hours later, once, from just word of mouth on the trail, that had been totally sapped away. So think about that, 100 gallons in 24 hours, gone. So long story short, you cannot rely on these caches at Kelso Valley Road and Bird Spring Pass to have water. If you get there and it does have water, hey, great, take only what you need and it can make life a lot easier. But you have to make a decision here at mile 609 at Landers to say, okay, I got to get from mile 609 to 651. And if I'm going to go to Willow Spring, okay, I don't have to take as much. But if I'm not going to go to Willow Spring, I got to assume these caches aren't going to be stocked when I get there. And I got to go, 42 miles here with no water. So how much water do I need for 42 miles? And for me, that was 7 liters. I'm throwing a lot of data at you guys, so feel free to ask questions as I go along. Let me just see if there's any questions in the chat box. Nope. Okay. Go back here. So talk a little bit about Southern California snow because, a lot of people don't realize that, you're going to hit snow more than likely before you even hit the Sierra, way before you hit the Sierra. Especially this year you will. If you're on the trail right now, you definitely will. And this can happen in one of 4 places. It can happen in Mount Laguna, Mount San Jacinto, and the Idlewild area. It definitely has snow on it right now. Big Bear is high enough and has snow on it right now. And so does Mount Baden-Powell and the mountains around it. And I actually have photos to show that. So don't think just because you're in the high desert that you're not going to get snow. I mean, yeah, you're in the high desert, but you're also going up to, Big Bear is in I think it's 8,000, maybe even 9,000 feet elevation. San Jacinto, if you decide to summit San Jacinto, which is a short side trip from the PCT and has amazing views, that's over 10,000 feet high. So you're going to get snow. So make sure you pack, clothes for that type of weather because you can get snow anywhere at any time on the PCT. So here's some photos that I took last week. It was last Monday, February 25th, yeah, showing what's on the mountains right now. So LA is down here. You can't see downtown, but it's out of view, or maybe that's it right there. This right here is one of these is Mount Baden-Powell and Mount Baldy, and the PCT goes right along the spine of this mountain range. So you can see there's a lot of snow, and we still have a lot of winter left. I mean, to me, winter goes all the way till at least into March, sometimes into April. It just depends on how long Mother Nature wants to go. In the background here, this is the Big Bear area. This is San Gorgonio. That's actually the highest peak in Southern California. So you can see that there's a good amount of snow on that. And then over here is Mount San Jacinto, and I have some closer up shots of that, but there's definitely a lot of snow on it right now. So yeah, here's a shot of, this is Mount San Jacinto right here. Oh no, I'm sorry, I had that wrong. That is the Big Bear area, San Gorgonio, and this is the Mount Baldy, Mount Baden-Powell area. So you don't go right on top of San Gorgonio, you actually go behind it, but you could summit it if you want. It's off trail, a good distance. But this right here, you're going right through this. And then here's San Gorgonio, Section C, Big Bear behind it. This is San Jacinto right here. And the PCT goes right along the spine right here. And what's interesting to note here is this big white area here, this is where the Cranston fire was last year. For you guys who don't know that, it was set intentionally by a guy, which is horrible, but fortunately they caught him, so he's in jail now. But you can see where it burned because that's, there's nothing to kind of cover the snow. So even though it doesn't look like there's snow up here, there's snow beneath the trees and the bushes. So right now, there's a lot of snow up there. A little closer and zoomed in one. The resolution's not as good, but I was taking it from my iPhone from a plane at 30,000 feet. So yeah, so definitely keep in mind you can hit and will hit snow in Southern California. Switching gears to the Sierra, I'm showing a lot of data here, but I like to, this website right here is great. You can go in here and click on any year and it can compare. So what I'm showing here is here in light blue, that's the average snowfall, and it's split up between the Southern Sierra, the Central Sierra, and Northern Sierra, of which you'll be going through all three at very high elevations. Our year right now is the dark blue line right here with the numbers on it. So you can see where we're at. We're above average in the north, above average in the central, and above average in the south. Now, where are we compared to previous high years or in low years, if you will? So the one in red is our highest winter on record. That was in 1982, 83. Our lowest was just back in 2014, right here. And then I also put the year of 20, the PCT class of 2017, 2 years ago, because that was a real high snow year. And you can see here, we're not as high so far, although we're pretty close on the north side, but we're still lower in the central and south sections. You're still going to hit a lot of snow, especially if you're leaving right now. And a more majority of you guys will be hitting the Sierra probably in the early to mid June time frame. You're going to hit snow regardless. Even during a real low snow year, like in 2014 when I hiked, you're hitting snow on almost every one of the high Sierra passes. So you can't really avoid it. It's just a matter of how much of it you're going to be hiking on, approaching the pass and once you get down from the pass. And we still have a whole, month left of winter, so these numbers could change dramatically between now and then. A few comments about water crossings. I've highlighted two here in red where unfortunately we lost a few hikers in 2017. And, this is one of the most dangerous aspects of any kind of backcountry travel is crossing creeks. It's not bears. As long as you keep a clean camp and you don't mess with them when they're, if their cubs are around. It's this, and well, for me, I really don't like lightning, but you can't get away from that sometimes. But you just you gotta make educated decisions here. There's a couple of points here, and these are just the ones that I think are some of the more challenging. There's many others. You just gotta always look at your maps the night before when you're in your tent and you're finally ready to go to sleep, and try and strategize here on when you should cross. One very important note here that really caught me off guard when someone told me this years ago. I didn't believe them. Was that crossing early in the morning can make a big difference. And I've actually seen this firsthand when I was in Yosemite years ago. I came to a campsite where it was a backpackers camp in the valley where you had to cross just a small creek. And I got there, I don't know, late morning, and it wasn't that high. I crossed over the bridge, no problem. And by the time my friends arrived at like 7 o'clock that night, it had come up a good 2, maybe 3 feet. And so that can make a really big difference. So if you know that there's going to be a challenging creek crossing coming up, and this is going to be a big challenge for the class of 2017 because of the snow, try to hit that crossing early in the day, because as the day goes on, sun melts the snow and more water's coming down these valleys. So something to keep in mind. It's really dangerous to cross these creeks alone. Always try to go in a group. As a matter of fact, the two hikers who passed away here in 2017, they were solo hikers by themselves, and of course, no one knows what happened, but they did find their bodies downstream. So we can only assume that when they tried to cross, they slipped, got swept away in the current, and water can sweep you off your feet very quickly, and it doesn't have to be very high to do it. And you got to remember when you're crossing these creeks, you're also stepping on sometimes very slick, wet rocks, and so it's hard to get traction. But if you cross with a group, and there's many methods to do this, and I'm by no means an expert, you could go out and educate yourself on methods to cross with groups to be safe. I highly recommend you do that because I think this will be one of the more challenging aspects for this class. And one other important note is you don't have to cross where the trail crosses. I mean, hell, some of the times you can't even see the trail because it's covered in snow. But if you come to a crossing, Evolution Creek up here is a good example because there's actually an alternate crossing about a mile before, which is a lot easier. But if you come to a crossing and you don't feel comfortable, hike upstream a bit. You know, just go continue uphill, hiking along the side of the creek until you find a spot where you feel like you can cross safely. Maybe there's a tree, maybe there's more rocks that you can hop across. You're going to get your feet wet, so you can't avoid that. But the further you go up the creek, the less flow there will be. It makes sense, right? There's more tributaries and streams kind of flowing into these creeks, so the further you go up, less water flow. If you have any videos of group crossings, please send them in to us or post them on the Facebook page. I'd really appreciate it. And of course, add, like I said earlier, add our email to your inReach and give us real-time water crossing updates, like right after you cross, and give me the times too. That's really helpful to say, hey, double tap, I crossed, Bear Creek at 9 a.m. the morning of, whatever date, and these are the conditions. And I will put that date and that time up on the water report. Okay. A quick note on High Sierra passes. Just wanted to summarize all the ones you'll be going up here. You can see that there's a lot of them, and this is my favorite part of the trail. I mean, the scenery up on these passes is it's unbelievable. But they can be challenging the time of year that you guys are hitting them because you're hitting them when there's going to be snow on them, regardless if it's a high or a low snow year. I'm not going to go into depth on the Sierra webinar video because that video that we have where I posted the link here, I think it's about 2 hours long. So Ned Tibbetts and we spent a lot of time talking about strategies on how to get up and over these passes safely. I personally like the one pass a day approach. Some people are stronger hikers and they can do two in some cases if they're spaced closer together. But it's all about how comfortable you feel, and you're definitely going to need at bare minimum micro spikes, maybe even crampons. Just depends on what you feel more comfortable with. An ice axe is probably going to be needed this year, or a whippet, which is basically just an extended, longer version of an ice axe. But let us know if you want us to do one for this year's class. I think the webinar from 2017 has all the pertinent information in it, but let us know and we'll do one if you guys want us to. Just some notes here, at the very bottom. Try to hit the passes earlier in the day. But here's where it gets tricky. Not too early because they'll be icy. So you really have to strategize this out. And this is why I like the one pass a day approach, because you want to camp as close to the pass as possible, which may mean you're camping on snow or very close to snow, and get up early enough so that you're going up it before it gets too soft. Because if it gets too soft, then you're post-holing. And for people who are not familiar with snow travel, post-holing sucks. There's really no other way to say it. It's when you're walking along and all of a sudden you just fall into the snow, and it can be, a couple of inches, it could be a foot, it could be even 2 feet. And the problem is this is very slow. And also you don't know what you're going to hit. For myself, I injured my right foot on my hike in 2014 coming down from Forester Pass, the highest point on the PCT. It was post-holing. I post-holed and my right foot hit a rock and I ended up getting some kind of stress fracture, which, impacted my next literally 1,500 miles of hiking. So the point here is try to get up and over the pass early, but not too early to avoid icy conditions, but try to get down before it gets too slushy so that you're post-holing. And one of the most infamous passes for this is Muir Pass at mile 839. Absolutely beautiful scenery, but you are hiking on miles upon miles of snow to get up to the pass and then down from the pass. And that can be very, very slow hiking if you're post-holing. So just kind of keep that in mind. See if there's any questions. Oh, here we go. Let's see. We've heard a lot about tough river crossings. You listed 6 bad ones. What's a realistic number of bad crossings in a year like this? That's from Napster Hikes. It really depends on what time of year you're going to be hitting the Sierra. Let me go back to this slide. These are the more infamous ones, especially Bear Creek. Bear Creek seems to be the one that gives people the most problems, although, it was 2 other ones that unfortunately caused the fatalities 2 years ago. If you're going to be there in the June timeframe with our current run rate of snow, I think every day you're in the High Sierra, you're going to be hitting at least one or two crossings that could be challenging. Because the problem is you have to you have to manage not only the crossings but the High Sierra passes. So, if we tell you hit a pass early in the day and give yourself plenty of time to get down, well, think about where the crossings are at. The crossings are usually at the bottom point between two passings, between two passes. And that could be late in the day, so you're hitting it at the worst possible time. So it's you just have to get a feel for what you're comfortable with and try to minimize the worst time of day on when you're going to make those crossings. Let's see. Okay, Saren says, "Do you have any recommendations for getting reliable weather forecasts?" Let's hold that off until we do the Q&A at the end. And then Boomer says, "When you say early but not too early, what time window did you try for or recommend?" Boomer, I'm assuming you're talking about the passes, right? Or are you talking about the crossings?
The passes.
The passes. Yeah, good question. You know, for me, I would start right when it gets light outside. Like actually start hiking right when you could start seeing, without your headlamp. That doesn't mean that's the end all be all solution. That's just my approach. And also, if there's any way to, this is tough in this area because you really don't get cell phone coverage, to get word of mouth in terms of what other people have seen so far. That's also real helpful. And that's why I ask people to send in videos and updates and photos of especially of the passes and the river crossings, because I'll put it up on the Facebook page. I'll put the updates on the water report, and that's actually a good point because I forgot to show you this. If you go back to the water report, the Sierra Snow and Ford report it's kind of separate from the other six. It's right here, but if you click on that and then pull up the PDF, it's going to look kind of blank now because I just cleaned this out from last year because it doesn't really help you to know what it was like last year. But if you can somehow get cell phone coverage before you leave Kennedy Meadows, I think there's Wi-Fi there. I could be wrong. And get this most updated report. It'll give you an idea of what other people have gone through. And they might say, hey, for this pass, I started I started hitting it at 6 a.m. and it was too early. It was too icy. And it really depends on the weather too. If it's a warmer June, then it'll get slushier earlier in the day as opposed to later in the morning. So it's really hard to give you an exact number because it's gonna change a bit. And it also depends if you bring an ice axe, crampons, and or micro spikes, because if you're comfortable in those kinds of conditions, and you've got the right equipment, then it's easier to climb up when it's nice and hard. But I personally myself, I wouldn't attempt it when it's real early in the morning unless I had crampons and an ice axe, and even then, that's sketchy. So it's hard to give you an exact number, unfortunately. But if you needed a number, I would say 7 a.m. or so. But you're gonna have to adjust that as you go along. And Sarah, and I promise I won't forget about your weather question, and we'll come back to that. Okay. So a couple of updates on closures. The PCTA does a really good job of summarizing all these at the link down here at the bottom of the slide. A couple of notes here. So the Cranston fire closure, it's really unfortunate because this is right where the mountain fire closure was. And this happened right as they were almost opening up the Cranston fire. The good news is that the PCT is not affected and is now open again. The bad news is that there's some other routes you could take to get into Idlewild sooner, and they're officially closed because of the Cranston fire. So, check this page and just get the most updated information. I copy exactly what's on the PCTA website into the water report. So for example, when you go look at, let's pull up section D. I think I have it in this one. Let me go down and see if nope. Okay, let's go back. Sorry guys, give me 1 second. If I pull up part 2, which is Idlewild to Agua Dulce, you'll probably see the first official closure impacting the PCT is the endangered species closure. This has been here for years. So I will put exactly what the PCT has put on there because we work closely together with each other to make sure we're communicating a unified message to you guys out there on the trail. And this really comes into play usually later in the season because fires are something that happens on the PCT every year. You can't get around it. Especially the last few years in Oregon and Washington, it's been really bad. And of course, last year in Northern California, we've had our worst fires in history. Fortunately, none of those affected the PCT, but they could have. But I'll put closures up on there and any kind of detour information that the PCTA is communicating. That way, it's like I said earlier, it's a one-stop shop for information. But it changes almost on a daily basis, especially with fire. So make sure you check it every time you get cell phone coverage. I'm not going to go through each of these. You can kind of read through them at your own leisure there. But one important note here is that in Oregon Section G, the PCT is open, but I think 99% of hikers take the Tunnel Falls detour because it's just beautiful, and Tunnel Falls is pretty dramatic. Only problem now is that detour is officially closed because there was another dumbass who intentionally lit a fire. Well, not intentionally, but I think he was lighting firecrackers, threw it off a bridge, and boom, big fire happened. And so while the PCT is open, the Tunnel Falls detour, as of now, is closed. Now, maybe by the time you guys get there, if you're northbound, that could be, August timeframe. Hopefully it'll be open, but as of now, it's closed. And then there's a couple more in Washington that caused a lot of headaches last year, but hopefully by the time you guys get there, it'll be open. Some more, I already talked about the PCTA trail closures page, the Facebook group. That's also a good forum for putting up data about fires and reroutes. This Firefinder app, there was a hiker from 2017 who sent this to me, and now I have it on my phone. It's just another good resource to have. And of course, you got to have cell coverage to get data, but it's one of many fire apps out there, but it's one of the ones I like to use. And actually, I took this photo from the Ponderosa fire in 2017. Now, this one didn't actually impact the PCT, but I took it as I was driving up to the PCT to pick up a hiker. Fires are very dangerous, and they're very unpredictable, and they change very fast. Don't mess with them. If you come across a trail that's closed because of fire, please do not disregard that closure and just keep on hiking through. They're getting worse and worse every year too, so just please don't mess with them. One other thing that a lot of people don't know about, I didn't know about it until I was hiking in 2014, is poodle dog bush. It's basically like poison oak, but a lot worse. And this is what it looks like. Now, it's not all over the trail, but you're gonna see it, especially in the Southern California sections, section C, D, E, and even some in F. A lot around section D, especially around areas that have had recent fires. Apparently, the seeds lie dormant in the soil, and then the heat from the fire causes them to grow. For lack of better words. And they actually, it's a really big, pretty bush. It's got this purple flower on it, but don't touch it. It's really bad if you do. And it kind of smells a little bit like marijuana. So if you kind of get a whiff of weed and you're like, wow, someone's smoking weed. Well, more than likely they are, because there are a lot of people smoking on the trail. But it could also be this bush. So if you see something like this, just avoid it at all costs. Don't touch it. And then, of course, poison oak, not as prevalent, but you will see this in a lot of areas that I didn't think I would, especially in Southern California. The key thing to remember is leaves of three, let them be. Now, not everything that has leaves of three is poison oak, but just if you avoid everything with leaves of three, then you know you're safe. And that's really it. Um, I threw a lot of information at you. I'm going to open it up to Q&A, but let me go back. I know there was a couple questions here I didn't answer, so let me go back to the first one here. Do you have any recommendations for getting reliable weather forecasts for points ahead along the trail? Good question. Of course, if you get cell coverage, you can, you surf wherever you want, but that's few and far between, especially in the Sierra. I have an inReach device, and there is a weather function on that you can use. There's two features. There's like basic weather, which is free. Of course, it's not free because you got to buy the subscription, a monthly subscription to use. And then there's like a more detailed weather forecast, which doesn't cost a lot. And I've used that in the past, and it's been pretty accurate. And what's nice about that is, you can do it wherever you're at because an inReach can, supposedly get to a satellite anywhere, any time of day. Now I've had to wait a few, sometimes a few minutes before my inReach linked up with the satellite, but it's a very reliable device to use for weather forecasts. Let's see. Okay, so I think we answered Boomer's question about the early time window. Then he says, "I have to say, being a first-time through hiker, this info and conversation is making this all too real." Yeah, that's true. But don't get scared. I'm not. The last thing I want to do is be an alarmist and make you think like it's really really scary and dangerous out there. It's not. But it can get dangerous if you don't make wise decisions. And I touched on a lot of topics tonight, and with water being the main goal, although that's not the only one, obviously. But to me, it's all about educating yourself. And the more info you have, then the better chance you have of making a safe decision. Eddie says, I'm submitting my vote for a 2019 Sierra webinar. Okay, Eddie. Well, I'll think about it. I could think the only reluctancy I have is that it's a lot of work to put it together, but I already have the presentation made up from 2017, so I just got to make it more updates. So if we decide to do it, I'll post it again, just like I did on all these Facebook pages about like this webinar here. But in the meantime, if you haven't already watched the 2017 Sierra webinar, take a look at that. There's actually two of them that we did. So both of them have the same information in them, although we got different questions in both. So if you don't want to watch the whole thing the second time, just go to the end and you could, see what other questions were asked in the second one. Boomer says, I second that. Virgo says 3. All right. All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. Oh, okay. There are two of us here. Those two. Okay. And then Eddie says at weather.org is a great resource. PCT weather.select trail. Yeah, there's all kinds of weather resources that you can use. Okay. Um, I see someone's typing a message, but I'll just open up the floor now to any questions. Oh, I skipped Tiffany's question. I'm sorry. Where was Tiffany's question? Oh, I'm sorry, Tiffany. I did skip that. When it comes to things you've talked about so far, in particular like water in the desert, passes, crossings in the Sierra, would you have any different or additional advice for southbounders? Oh, great question. Yeah, because you're going to be hitting these areas at completely different times than northbounders. And for you, Tiffany, I don't know if you can tell me when do you plan on starting your southbound trip? Is it like early July timeframe?
Yeah, ideally that would be great.
Okay, yeah, and I don't. You may have to push that out a little bit because I think the entire West Coast is getting a lot of snow now. But depending on your comfortability with snow, let's just assume for the sakes of this question, early July. So you'll be hitting the Sierra in the October timeframe, which unless we get an early, snow flurry or snowstorm, which can happen in October, you won't have to deal with snow too much. I love hiking in the Sierra in October. It's my favorite time to do it, but it does get a little more dicey in terms of weather, and you can get a snowstorm here and there. So you might want to at least bring microspikes. I don't know if you'd need an ice axe though. I mean, that's really a personal decision at that point. And then you'll be hitting I think the more challenging part is you'll be hitting Southern California in November. And water sources are not going to be as plentiful as they would be, say, right now or in April when the herd's going through. But you can get rain in no in November timeframe also. I think you're going to have to plan on longer waterless stretches. So really, really get to know what your body needs, and when I say that, I mean like find out like how many liters per mile do you need, or how many miles per liter do you need? You can go the other way too. And everyone's body is different. The only way you can figure that out is to go out there and do practice trips. I see it every year. I see people getting on the trail who have never hiked a day in their life, and that's great and all. But how do you know how your body's going to react not only to the exertion, but also the weight in your pack? You might want to have someone go through, an experienced hiker go through your pack and reduce your weight. It's all about knowing your body, and the only way you can do that is through practice trips. Does that answer your question, Tiffany?
Yep, that was really helpful. Thanks.
Sure, no problem. Okay, and sorry for skipping your question earlier. Let's see. Boomer says, I'm sure there's no way to know this, but there's some kind of trail angel meeting, especially with the herd increasing each year. I don't think they do like a meeting, but I think they have a Facebook page. I think if you just type in PCT Trail Angels, I think they communicate a lot through that. The Trail Angels are a real unique breed of people. They're extremely generous, extremely kind. So please, 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 tip them whatever you can when you're there. Sometimes you have to you have to find out where to tip them because they don't specifically come out and ask it. But if you can spare the money, it really helps them. I mean, especially in some of these places are like huge operations. If you go to Donna Softly's place, she's got that place running like a well-oiled machine. Um, and she's also a good first point of contact for trail angeling. If she doesn't know the answer to your questions, I'm sure she can get you in touch with someone who does. Okay. Any other questions? I see someone's typing, so I'll let them finish typing here before we officially end the training. Although Virgo, you can just say it if you want. It might be faster. Oh, here we go. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Oh, okay. No problem. My pleasure. Yeah. Just be
I might,
safe.
I might add,
Go ahead.
add another question.
Sure, go
Have
for it.
you recommended to use Garmin InReach? Would you also use instant messages where I could send lots of them daily, or just with just a marker with a position, and let's say water is running as I could use it, or should I use the messages which cost per message?
Yeah, if you just send me your GPS location with a pre-programmed message, that doesn't really help me too much. Because it doesn't really give an update on the water source or the pass or the river crossing. So unfortunately, the best way is to actually type out a message. Now, I know you can pair the inReach to your phone, so you don't have to type it out on the inReach, which can be really, really time consuming. Um, so if there's a way that if you can figure out how to pair up your inReach via Bluetooth to your cell phone before you leave, then it'll make it a lot easier. It's not a lot of people who are doing it, but the ones who send it in, it's perfect, right? Because I can tell they're paired up to their phone because they're sending long messages. Because unfortunately, you got to say this mileage point. This was the date. And I forgot, tell me what your name is too, your trail name, because we put your trail name on the actual update because we want to give you credit for supplying the information. And if you just send me the waypoint, it doesn't really help. Now it's work. I'm not gonna blow smoke here. It takes time for you to compile this and however you send it, whether it be your inReach or email or text message. But what I do is I write this stuff down. I actually have a little pad and paper, and as I'm going through the water sources, I say, okay, mileage, 171.3, water flowing well. And then when I come into cell phone coverage, I just type it all up on my phone and I send it in. I mean, I'm referring to my hike in 2014 when someone else was updating the water report, but it's very helpful for the hikers behind you.
Can you talk
Okay, thank
briefly
you.
about,
Sure.
sorry,
That's right. Go
Lucas,
ahead.
can you talk briefly about snakes or snake bites? Is that common or not?
It's not really that common. I mean, you are going to see rattlesnakes, especially in the Southern California section, and you might even see them in the Sierra, although they're few and far between up there. You know, you just got to get into a habit, especially in the first 700 miles of the trail. Kind of always be looking at the sides of the trail because they like to hide underneath the shade of a bush that's overhanging the trail sometimes, and they really blend in to the desert, brownish background. And so, I mean, hell, one time I didn't even know there was one there until it rattled at me, right next to me, and I'll tell you, that'll scare the shit out of you. But it's not like the snakes are coming after you aggressively. They're only going to bite you if they feel threatened. So if you see one, give it plenty of leeway, plenty of berth. And if you do happen to get bit by one, it's there's really no other way but to get yourself to a hospital as fast as possible. I mean, all those other things that people say about sucking the venom out using a snake bite kit, they don't work. Um, and it's challenging because you have to get yourself to a hospital or to some kind of medical attention. And the one common theme I've heard is, don't get your heart rate up while you're doing this because that'll increase the flow of the venom through your system. Well, that could be challenging. Let's say if you're in the Sierra because you got to go up over a pass and your heart rate's going to be flowing. This is why, and I'm glad you brought this question. This is why I can't recommend enough to have some kind of beacon, like the inReach or a spot. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the spot. I used it for many years and it became extremely unreliable for me. And it wasn't sending out my I'm okay messages at night. I've never had that happen with the inReach. Now, maybe the spot's gotten better, but it's really important that, especially if you're hiking by yourself or if you're hiking in a group, that at least one person in your group has one of these devices because you never know what's going to happen when you're in the backcountry or hell, even in the high desert section when you're just 2 miles away from, a road. And all these devices have an SOS button on them. I actually used mine a couple years ago, not for me, but for a John Muir trail hiker who was really sick. And this happened to be on a section where the JMT was the PCT. And we ended up using my inReach device to get a CHP helicopter flown in to pick her up and take her to a hospital where she got on antibiotics and she was okay. But if I didn't have that device, or if she didn't have it, or someone else didn't have it, she could have been in a world of trouble. So I'm sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there, but it gave me an opportunity to put a spiel in there about a GPS device. Because one thing I know a lot of people understand this, but surprisingly enough, there's still a lot of people who don't. If you put yourself in these positions and you need to be rescued and they don't know that you need to be rescued, say you just go missing for a few days, now people are looking for you and they're putting their lives in danger, the search and rescue team. So, you gotta think of it not just for you, but you gotta think of other people's safety too. So please carry a beacon device with you. Okay. I think we hit all the questions. And there's some more comments about a forecast. So yeah, check out those websites. I'm sure there's plenty of them out there. Any other questions before we end the webinar?
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Sure, no problem. If you guys have any questions, you know how to reach me. Just send questions into the water report and please pay it forward. And if you're using the water report, then please send us updates so people behind you can benefit from your knowledge. And most importantly, have fun out there. You guys are in for a really, really, really great experience, and you're really going to enjoy it. So have a great hike, everyone. Take care.